Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something. Every man eventually learns the hard way. It's not the woman who cries, begs, or fights that he can't forget. It's the woman who walks away with grace. The one who leaves without drama, without bitterness, with her head held high and her dignity untouched. That image burns into his memory, and long after she's gone, it's the silence of her strength that keeps him awake at night. When a woman walks away with grace, it does something profound to a man's psychology. It's not the drama, not the tears, not the shouting matches that linger in his mind when she's gone. What lingers is the image of her standing tall, her dignity intact, her energy no longer begging for him to change, but instead reclaiming her life without bitterness. Men miss women who walk away gracefully because in that moment she demonstrates something rare, self-respect that cannot be negotiated, and self-worth that does not rely on his validation. We live in a world where people often confuse love with possession. Men sometimes take for granted the woman who gives her time, her devotion, her emotional labor, assuming she will always be there. They become numb to the gift of her presence. But when she chooses to leave, not with a storm of anger, but with composure and quiet strength, it wakes him up. That calmness is a reflection of her power. It's the kind of leaving that says, I know my value and I don't need to convince you of it. That kind of exit echoes louder in his memory than any fight ever could. Graceful detachment is magnetic because it shows that her sense of identity is not intertwined with his approval. Many men are used to seeing women lose themselves in the relationship, making them the center of gravity around which their lives spin. When she doesn't, when she steps away without bitterness, it forces him to reckon with what he lost. He realizes she was never dependent on him for her happiness, and that's why she is unforgettable. He will remember the woman who didn't chase, who didn't beg, who didn't reduce herself to fit inside the limited box he offered her. Walking away gracefully is not about coldness. It's not about punishing him. It's about choosing yourself in a moment where it would be easier to choose comfort, familiarity, or the illusion of security. It's about saying, I deserve more than crumbs, and I'd rather eat alone than be starved in your company. Men don't miss women who cling desperately or lash out when things fall apart. They miss the woman who showed them kindness until the very end, but who refused to stay 1 minute past the point where her spirit was being compromised. There's a quiet confidence in grace. It doesn't need to scream. It doesn't need to perform. It's a form of strength that is deeply feminine and deeply powerful. Men may not always recognize it when she's there, but they feel the void when she's gone. The texts stop coming. The energy that once lifted him, supported him, nurtured him, no longer flows toward him. Suddenly, he's left with the echo of her absence, and he realizes how much he leaned on that presence without ever acknowledging it. That absence burns because it was taken away with such calm finality. She didn't need to prove a point. She simply lived her truth. The woman who walks away gracefully teaches a man a lesson he may carry with him for the rest of his life. She becomes a reference point. He might date again, he might even marry, but there will always be that memory of the woman who chose herself without hostility. He will compare the emotional stability, the self-respect, the quiet dignity she embodied. That comparison will haunt him because deep down he knows he had the chance to meet her at her level and he didn't rise. And by the time he realizes it, she's already gone, not looking back. A graceful exit shows maturity. It says that love isn't about control. It isn't about winning. It isn't about ego. It's about partnership. And when partnership is no longer there, it's about having the courage to release what doesn't serve you. That courage leaves an impression. Men might try to fill the void quickly with distractions, but eventually, in the stillness of their own thoughts, the image of her resurfaces. The way she carried herself, the way she didn't collapse, the way she walked with poise even through heartbreak. That image holds more power than 1,000 accusations ever could. What men miss when a woman walks away with grace is not just her physical presence, but the energy she brought into their lives, the laughter, the warmth, the nurturing, the belief in him, all of it becomes clear in hindsight. While she was there, it may have been taken for granted, blurred into the background noise of daily life. But in her absence, each detail sharpens. Her perfume on a jacket, her laughter in a memory, her encouragement during his toughest times. All of it returns like a haunting reminder of what he let slip through his fingers. And because she left without resentment, the memories aren't clouded by anger. They're sharper, purer, and harder to forget. Walking away gracefully isn't easy. It requires restraint. It requires emotional discipline to not unleash every hurt, to not demand closure in the form of explanations he can't provide. It requires faith that you don't need to win the final conversation because your dignity is the only closure you need, and that faith is what makes it unforgettable. Men may not always articulate it, but they admire strength in a woman. They admire her ability to be both soft and strong, to love deeply, but not lose herself in the process. When she walks away with grace, he sees all of that in one defining moment. Grace is are in a world obsessed with drama. That's why it's missed. Men may say they want passion, fire, intensity, and many do, but what stays imprinted on their minds is the woman who knew when to let go without losing herself, the woman who remained composed in the face of disappointment, who refused to betray her values even when it hurt. That kind of woman is unforgettable because she embodies something higher than romance. She embodies self-respect. And respect, once felt, never truly fades. The truth is, men don't miss women who make leaving messy. The chaos becomes the memory, not the person. But when she leaves gracefully, the memory of her essence remains. That essence becomes the benchmark, the quiet whisper that surfaces when he least expects it. It's what makes him wonder if he'll ever meet someone like her again. It's what makes him replay conversations in his head, searching for the moment he could have chosen differently. It's what makes him miss not just her, but the man he could have been if he had stepped up. Every woman has the choice in those moments of heartbreak, to stay longer than she should, to leave in anger, or to walk away with her head high. The first two will drain her, but the last one will free her. And though it might hurt in the short term, it leaves a legacy. Because men miss women who walk away gracefully, not because she tried to make him miss her, but because in her grace, she showed him exactly what he lost. Because men miss women who walk away gracefully, not because she tried to make him miss her, but because in her grace, she showed him exactly what he lost. And the reason this resonates so deeply is because true power doesn't scream, it doesn't beg to be seen, it doesn't demand attention. True power is quiet, unwavering, and unshakable. When she carries herself with that kind of presence, it pierces through the noise of his life. It lingers in his subconscious long after she has exited the stage. He may not even realize it in the beginning, but with time, the gravity of her absence starts to reveal itself, and he begins to understand that she was irreplaceable in ways he didn't appreciate when she was still there. The thing about a graceful departure is that it shifts the dynamic entirely. Most men expect a fight. They anticipate tears, accusations, ultimatums, or attempts to make them feel guilty. They prepare for the conflict. But when none of that comes, when instead she leaves with dignity, with composure, with a sense of certainty that her worth extends far beyond his recognition of it, it disarms him. He has nothing to push against, no battle to dismiss, no defensive wall to build. She simply removes herself from the story, and in doing so, she denies him the comfort of framing her as bitter or needy. She denies him the narrative that could soothe his ego. And in that silence, in that absence of drama, he is left alone to wrestle with himself. That's what makes Grace so powerful. It's not just about her. It's about the mirror it forces him to look into. Her absence highlights his shortcomings. Her quiet exit exposes the spaces where he should have stepped up. She doesn't have to tell him he failed her. The emptiness she leaves behind does that work. And while he might not admit it to anyone else, in his private thoughts, he will play the reel of moments where he could have done better. That mental replay is the kind of torment no angry confrontation could ever achieve. Because an argument can be dismissed, a shouting match can be justified, but the quiet dignity of her leaving, that's undeniable. And here's the thing, when a woman walks away with grace, she's not doing it for him, she's doing it for herself. She's reclaiming her energy, she's reclaiming her peace, she's drawing a line that says, I choose me. And that choice is magnetic. Men respect what respects itself. They may not admit it in the moment, but deep down they know when they are in the presence of someone who values themselves too much to accept less than they deserve. That level of self-respect becomes the standard by which he subconsciously measures every woman who comes after. And that's why he misses her, because she raised the bar and he can't lower it in his mind without also lowering himself. Grace has a way of haunting him. It's in the way she didn't slam the door but closed it softly. It's in the way she didn't make him the villain of every sentence but instead chose to let actions speak for themselves. It's in the way she held her head high when she could have bowed it in defeat. That haunting doesn't come from the chaos of leaving. It comes from the clarity. And clarity, once seen, cannot be unseen. He may go out searching for distractions, filling his days with noise. But late at night, in those quiet moments when there's no one else around, it's her strength that resurfaces in his mind. And the more he tries to bury it, the louder it becomes. Walking away with grace also rewrites her own story. She doesn't carry the weight of regret that often comes with messy endings. She doesn't have to replay her own behavior with shame, wondering if she lowered herself, wondering if she begged for someone who was never worthy. Instead, she can look back and say, I loved fully, I gave my best, and when it was no longer reciprocated, I left with my dignity intact. That's the kind of closure that doesn't come from him, it comes from within. And ironically, that's also what makes her unforgettable to him. Because she didn't leave fragments of herself behind, she left whole, and wholeness is magnetic. Many men don't realize until much later that what they miss most isn't just her presence, but the way she made them feel about themselves. A graceful woman inspires respect. She inspires a man to be better, to rise to the occasion, to match her energy. When she Eve's with that same energy, it leaves a void, not because she was a crutch, but because she was a mirror reflecting his potential. And when she's gone, he's left with the uncomfortable reality of who he really is without her influence. That gap is where the longing comes from. That gap is why she is missed. And here's the irony. Many men think they want a woman who will fight to stay, who will prove her love by refusing to let go. But in reality, it's the woman who shows she can let go that leaves the deepest mark. Because she shows that her love was never about desperation. It was never about clinging. It was never about needing him to complete her. It was a choice. And when that choice is withdrawn, he realizes he wasn't her lifeline. He was simply someone she allowed into her world. That realization is humbling, and it's often only felt once she's gone. The woman who walks away gracefully also teaches the world a lesson beyond just him. She shows other women that dignity doesn't have to be sacrificed for love. She shows that walking away doesn't mean weakness. It means strength of the highest order. It means choosing peace over chaos, self-respect over temporary comfort. That kind of example ripples outward because grace is contagious. When others see it, they are reminded of their own power, reminded that their worth isn't tied to someone else's inability to recognize it. And men, whether they admit it or not, admire that strength. They may not always say it out loud, but they feel it. They recognize when they've encountered a woman who knows her value. That recognition creates a standard. Even if he moves on, even if he builds a new life somewhere in the back of his mind, that standard lives. And it whispers to him whenever he tries to settle for less. It reminds him of the woman who didn't need him, but chose him, and then chose herself when he failed to meet her there. That whisper doesn't go away. It becomes part of his inner dialogue, shaping his choices, shaping his growth, shaping his understanding of love. V2 grace is rare because it requires restraint in the most emotionally charged moments. It requires the discipline to not react, to not let pain dictate behavior, to not let ego take the wheel. It requires strength to sit with heartbreak and still choose dignity over destruction. And because it's rare, it's precious. That's why it leaves a mark. Men might not remember every relationship, but they will remember the woman who walked away with grace. She becomes the ghost of possibility, the reminder of what love could have been if only he had matched her courage, her commitment, her clarity. And perhaps that's the most profound part of it. Grace leaves him with unfinished business, not with her, but with himself. It leaves him questioning why he couldn't step up, why he couldn't hold on to someone so valuable, why he let her slip away without fighting for her. Those questions don't fade quickly. They stay, echoing in the corners of his mind. And every time they resurface, so does the memory of her walking away, head held high, heart intact, choosing herself without apology. That is why men miss women who walk away gracefully, not because she tried to be missed, not because she demanded it, but because in the end her grace was the loudest statement she ever made. That is why men miss women who walk away gracefully, not because she tried to be missed, not because she demanded it, but because in the end, her grace was the loudest statement she ever made. And that statement doesn't fade over time, it deepens. With every passing month, with every relationship he tries to build afterward, with every attempt to replace her, that quiet dignity shines brighter in his memory, because what she embodied is timeless. People forget words, they forget the details of arguments, but they don't forget the feeling someone left them with. And the feeling of grace is unforgettable. It's easy to overlook grace when you're on the receiving end of it. When she forgives without holding a grudge, when she loves without trying to cage, when she listens without judgment, it may feel ordinary in the moment. But once it's gone, once her presence is no longer a part of his daily reality, he starts to realize that what she gave was extraordinary. She made love feel safe, warm, and inviting, and he only sees the true magnitude of that when the warmth is replaced with emptiness. The absence of grace makes its presence unforgettable. Men miss women who walk away gracefully because those women refuse to be defined by pain. They refuse to make bitterness their legacy. Instead, they rise above it. They choose not to fight for a connection that no longer honors them. They decide their energy is too precious to be wasted on convincing someone of their worth. That refusal creates an impression that outlives the relationship itself, because it's not just about the love she gave, it's about the example she set. She showed him and anyone watching that dignity is the highest form of strength. There's another reason she lingers in his thoughts. When a woman walks away in anger, it's easy for a man to dismiss her as emotional or dramatic. When she begs, it's easy for him to frame her as needy. But when she leaves with grace, none of those narratives apply. He cannot box her into a stereotype. He cannot reduce her to a caricature of heartbreak. She becomes something much harder to forget, a woman who loved fully and who knew when to love herself more. That duality of being soft enough to love deeply, but strong enough to walk away, creates an image that men struggle to erase. Grace speaks to something primal in human nature. We are wired to crave certainty, to cling to control, to prove our worth when it feels questioned. But grace requires letting go. It requires surrendering to the truth without trying to manipulate it. And that surrender is terrifying for many. But when a woman does it with poise, she shows a level of courage most people only dream of. Men recognize that courage even if they don't say it. And because it is so rare, it burns itself into their memory. Walking away gracefully also changes the trajectory of her own life in ways that ripple outward. Because she doesn't deplete herself with bitterness, she keeps her energy available for new beginnings. She doesn't drag the weight of anger into her next chapter. She doesn't carry the heavy chains of resentment that would otherwise anchor her to the past. She steps into her future lighter, freer, more aligned with her truth. That energy, that lightness makes her even more magnetic in the world. And men, especially the ones she left behind, feel the difference. They see her thriving, not out of spite, but out of authenticity. That thriving amplifies their sense of loss. The truth is, men often only realize the value of grace when they encounter its opposite. They might date someone new who makes every conflict a battlefield, who uses anger as a weapon, who plays games with emotions. And suddenly the memory of the woman who walked away with calm dignity becomes a sanctuary in their mind. She becomes the comparison point. And that comparison does not fade, because grace, once experienced, changes the way people perceive everything that comes after. What makes grace so unforgettable is that it doesn't just impact him, it transforms her. When she walks away without drama, she preserves her power. She doesn't scatter it in arguments or waste it on someone unwilling to change. She keeps her essence whole. That wholeness carries into everything she touches afterward, her career, her friendships, her future relationships. People can feel when someone has not been broken by their past, but instead refined by it. And men who have lost that presence feel the sting of what they let slip away. This is why men miss women who walk away gracefully, because she ran. E presents the intersection of love and self-respect. She proves that one does not have to come at the cost of the other. She can love him, but she can also love herself enough to let go. And when he finally grasps that, when he finally understands what he had in his hands, it is too late. The image of her walking away becomes a metaphor for everything he could have had but didn't nurture. And that metaphor follows him, teaching him silently, shaping his choices even long after she's gone. There's a deep psychological imprint that grace leaves behind. Studies on memory tell us that emotionally charged experiences are the ones we recall most vividly. But what is often overlooked is that calm clarity, especially in moments where most people expect chaos, creates just as strong an imprint, if not stronger. Because it surprises the brain. It's unexpected. It rewires the moment into something unforgettable. When she leaves gracefully, the brain doesn't file it away as another argument or another breakup. It files it under rare, and rare is always remembered. And the longer he lives, the more he understands the rarity of what he lost. As he matures, as he gains perspective, as he experiences more of life, he realizes that most people don't leave that way. Most people leave messily, fueled by ego or fear. But she didn't. She left with her integrity intact. And the older he gets, the more he respects that, the more he aches for it, the more he realizes how little he did to deserve it at the time. That realization doesn't go away. It deepens with time, making her presence, even in absence, impossible to escape. What's most profound about this is that she doesn't need him to miss her. She doesn't rely on his longing to validate her choice. She doesn't wait for his realization to justify her walk. She already knew her value when she left. That's what makes her so unforgettable. She wasn't trying to prove anything. She wasn't staging a performance. She was simply honoring herself. And in that authenticity, she created a legacy in his heart and mind that no one can replicate. This is why grace is the ultimate form of strength. It doesn't just change the moment, it changes the story. It turns what could have been just another bitter ending into something far more powerful, a lesson, a standard, a memory that never fades. And men, no matter how much time passes, no matter who comes after, will always remember the woman who walked away gracefully. Because she showed them something rare. She showed them what it looks like to value yourself above the comfort of staying, above the fear of leaving, above the temptation of drama. And once a man has seen that, once he has felt that, he cannot unsee it, he cannot unfeel it, and he will miss it for as long as he lives. And once a man has seen that, once he has felt that, he cannot unsee it, he cannot unfeel it, and he will miss it for as long as he lives. Because what she gave him was more than love. It was a lesson in what true strength looks like, a lesson in what self-worth feels like, a lesson in how powerful, quiet confidence can be. That kind of lesson stays with a man in ways he doesn't even anticipate. It sneaks up on him in moments he least expects. When he's standing in a room filled with people but suddenly feels a wave of emptiness. When he hears laughter that reminds him of hers and realizes it doesn't sound the same. When he finds himself being treated well by someone else but still feels that it lacks the depth she carried so effortlessly. Grace becomes the yardstick by which he measures everything that follows. This is why men don't just miss the woman, they miss the way she made them feel about themselves when they were in her presence. Because a woman who can walk away gracefully is also the woman who carried herself with grace while she was there. That grace shows up in how she listened without judgment, how she brought calm into chaos, how she nurtured without demanding applause. He realizes, often too late, that her strength was never loud, but it held everything together. She was the quiet foundation, the unseen anchor, the steady presence. And when that foundation is gone, he finally notices how much it carried. The haunting part of grace is that it leaves him with no closure to argue against. When someone leaves with bitterness or anger, you can tell yourself a story about them. You can reduce them to their last words, their last fight, their last moment of weakness. But when she leaves with dignity, there is no story to cling to. There's nothing to vilify. There's only silence, and that silence becomes deafening. He has no narrative to protect himself with, so he is forced to sit with the truth. And the truth is that he lost someone extraordinary because he didn't rise to meet her. Grace also carries an element of mystery that men can never quite resolve. Did she cry herself to sleep the night she left? Did she miss him at all? Did she ever second-guess her choice? He doesn't know, and he never will. Because she didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her crumble. She didn't expose her lowest point to him. She walked away with composure, and in doing so, she forever controlled the memory of who she was in his mind. He remembers her as strong, as untouchable, as self-possessed. And that image is far more powerful than any display of weakness could ever be. There's also something profoundly magnetic about a woman who can choose solitude over settling. Most people are terrified of being alone. They would rather cling to a half-love than face the quiet of their own company. But when she walks away gracefully, she demonstrates that she would rather embrace the uncertainty of her own future than compromise her self-worth. That decision radiates power. And men miss that power because it reflects back to them what they lacked, the courage to be whole on their own. She became a mirror of the bravery they never found in themselves, and losing that mirror leaves them disoriented. The reality is, men don't miss every woman. They don't miss the ones who stayed too long, who gave too much of themselves without boundaries, who begged for scraps of affection. They may feel guilty for hurting those women, but guilt fades. They may feel pity, but pity doesn't leave a lasting mark. What they miss, what etches itself into their soul, is the woman who could love fiercely but also protect herself fiercely, the woman who gave them a chance to rise but didn't collapse when they fell short. The woman who walked away not because she stopped caring, but because she cared about herself enough to let go. That balance is unforgettable. And the irony is, in walking away gracefully, she often becomes the catalyst for his growth. She becomes the lesson that teaches him the cost of complacency. She becomes the reminder that if he doesn't value someone fully when they are present, he may lose them forever. Many men only step into their true maturity because of the loss of a woman who carried herself this way. And though he may never tell her, though he may never get the chance to show her, the truth is that she shaped him more in leaving than she ever could have in staying. Her grace also sets her apart from almost everyone else he meets afterward. Relationships come and go, but few people leave without some residue of bitterness or resentment. Few leave clean, few leave whole. She did. And that becomes her legacy in his life. She was the one who loved without chains, who let go without vengeance, who walked away without leaving scars on either of them. That kind of purity doesn't fade from memory, it grows. Because every time he experiences the opposite, every time he finds himself in drama or chaos or resentment, he remembers her. And in remembering her, he misses her all over again. Grace lingers in small details, in the way she smiled even when she was tired, in the way she believed in even when he doubted himself, in the way she left without slamming the door but made sure it was closed. He replays those moments not because she wanted him to, but because they became imprinted in his heart. A graceful woman doesn't have to demand to be remembered. She doesn't have to fight for significance. She becomes significant simply by being authentic. And authenticity in a world full of facades is unforgettable. Men also miss the way Grace makes them feel accountable. While she was with him, her self-respect was a constant invitation for him to rise higher. She never had to nag or demand. Her very presence was the standard. And when she walked away, that accountability didn't vanish. It became internal. He started to notice where he was falling short in other areas of life because her absence highlighted what he wasn't doing. She became the voice in the back of his head, reminding him of the man he could have been if he had only stepped up. And that voice doesn't fade, it becomes part of him. There's a profound beauty in the way a graceful exit rewrites the meaning of loss. Loss is usually filled with anger, resentment, and unfinished conversations. But when she leaves with dignity, the loss itself feels sacred. It feels like something he must carry with care because she carried herself with care. That makes her different from anyone else. He doesn't talk about her with bitterness. He doesn't dismiss her. He remembers her with reverence, even if he doesn't say it aloud. And that reverence is the truest sign of how deeply he misses her. And though he may try to replace her, though he may try to bury her memory under new faces and new loves, Grace has a way of standing out. It cannot be replicated because Grace isn't about looks or charm or even chemistry. It's about character. And character cannot be copied. When he meets someone new, he might look for her laughter, her kindness, her patience, her strength. But those things were hers and hers alone. And the more he searches, the more he realizes she cannot be replied. A said, that realization deepens the missing, turning it into a quiet ache that follows him through life. That is why men miss women who walk away gracefully, because she was more than just a partner. She was a standard, a mirror, a lesson, a presence that cannot be duplicated. She showed him what it looks like to combine love with strength, softness with resilience, devotion with self-respect. And when she left, she didn't just leave him without her. She left him with himself, with his regrets, his shortcomings, his unfulfilled potential. And in that space, her grace became the most powerful memory of all,